Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Security Sandbox. And as always, Sandeep and myself are hosting, and we have a guest today in Phil Trainer. Sandeep and Phil, do you want to say hi?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, man. Viv, good to be doing another session with you yet again. I think this is number 4. Um, Thrilled. We've got, as usual, another fantastic topic and a fantastic guest. Without further ado, I will hand it over to author, product manager, storyteller, and all-round good guy, Phil Trainer. Welcome,
Awesome.
Phil.
Yeah, Sandeep, Vivek, super happy to be here. This is my first one, and all my colleagues have got to be on this, so I don't feel left out anymore. At Nozomi, I'm one of the product managers. I have a couple different hats, threat intelligence, the federal roadmap, and also data integration. So I get to touch a lot of different parts of the product and how they all fit together and work with different people to solve problems.
Excellent. So the topic of the day is threat intelligence. I know it's been an interesting development on our end. The industry in general is enamored with threat intelligence, and what people understand about cybersecurity is more or less always based on some level of either threat perception or actual intelligence. So, Sandeep, do you want to kick us off on some of the key things that we've been thinking about recently and how we are approaching solving customer problems using threat intelligence in a unique way, as opposed to what people have always done and taken too much time in getting to the answers.
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, one of the key reasons we're here today is talking about, of course, OT environments. Operational availability is one of the biggest pillars when we talk about OT operations, right? It's all about that uptime. And of course, safety. Human lives are often impacted. So I think one of the big things today is understanding how we can unify cyber threat intelligence. There's so much threat intelligence out there. There's IT threat intelligence, there's OT threat intelligence. You've got vertical specific threat intelligence. You've got region specific threat intelligence. So I think now more than ever, we need a way to be able to stitch that all together. And that ties in very well with why we asked to have Phil on the show today. Of course, Phil being product manager here at Nozomi for threat intelligence. We've recently introduced some new features, some new partnerships, and some new collaborations that overall help us get to this end goal of unifying cyber threat intelligence. So Phil, maybe if I could turn that over to you for a moment and get some insight as to what we've been doing, what are some of the strategic partnerships, what's new, and why have you been trying to work on this for the past year? Why is this so important to Nozomi?
Absolutely. I mean, really what it comes down to at the end of the day is that threat intelligence is delivering that known maliciousness to our users so that they can correlate their ongoing events and make real action decisions. And I mean, as you just mentioned, Sandeep, that the bleeding over between IT and OT is really becoming one unified concept. And that was really the volition of one of our major partnerships, which we really just launched just now. In fact, I mean, just in August, the TI expansion pack that we launched with Mandiant. Mandiant's been a partner now for quite some time. I think it goes all the way back to 2017. We first started collaborating on different kinds of malware research. I know we collaborated on the Triton malware and on a few other things, but we really got involved closely with them with security operations in May. But the launch of this expansion pack really brings their threat intelligence into our solutions. And that's going to really have a massive impact on our users' ability to attack the problem in the way you described it, Sandeep, with the unified threat intelligence across OT and IT.
Well, let me ask you this question, Phil. A lot of people historically have looked at different feeds to understand the threat perception or the threat vectors and the overall picture specific to their vertical. Right? So if you're in the power industry or in oil and gas or other verticals, one, you might have an ISAC, an information sharing analysis center for your own group that is giving you information. Other times you have, CISA or other government agencies providing information about what they see as an upcoming threat targeting their vertical. Other times they have a system like Nozomi that's generating alerts so they know what issues they have in their environment, and they might be sharing that with friends in the industry, right? So sometimes it's automatic, like the Ethos server that we all, many IDS vendors are part of, right? Other times it's so confusing because there's so much noise out there, right? Everyone has a different naming convention for what they consider a threat actor, right? Someone might call it APT, someone might call it some fancy name, bear and panda, and others might have their own versions of it, and not everything matches. So, no two people are talking about the exact same thing when it comes to, what's attacking and, who's responsible. And of course, attribution is so difficult in this space. So, could you maybe talk about how we're trying to distill that to as simple as possible so that people are not trying to boil the ocean, but just get to the answer they're looking for? Right. So I think that simplicity and making sure things are not complex overly for no reason is a key aspect of the solution that you all came up with.
The last thing you hit just nails it, the simplicity of it. Can you actually give me a piece of information that I can do something with that solves my problem in this ocean of information out there? And we've recently launched something that really targets that very specifically. It's called threat cards. And threat cards are just a panel-oriented display. It's in Vantage only. For those who don't know, Vantage is our SaaS platform. Vantage is enriched by a lot of our threat intelligence, but also it's enriched by the Mandiant threat intelligence as well. But what threat cards do is it attacks that problem very specifically. There's a million different naming conventions, but also like complexities. We'll say that a certain, not just a piece of malware, a certain threat actor group, they're doing techniques in a process way. It's not a single CVE that's really the technique that they're using. They have the whole kill chain. They do different things. It would be great to say, okay, what industry is being impacted by this? What threat actors? What techniques they're using? What rules? And then tie it to your own assets. So, I mean, Vantage obviously is going to sit at the very top of your infrastructure. We have our ARC and N2OS, Guardian, CMC, and remote collectors, and all of our stuff on site. That data goes up to Vantage, and you'll be able to look at this and it'll enrich it in a very powerful way to say, okay, sure, here's APT32, here's Cozy Bear, here's blah. And does this impact me? Okay, just show me the ones that impact my industry. Just show me ones that impact my assets. It's not only making people empowered to understand larger pictures, but have those kind of conversations. And let's say, for example, the CISO rings up the SOC manager and says, I recently learned about something. How does that impact us? What actions can we check for this? And absolutely, that's going to be front and center. So now when you go into Vantage, there is a new tab that goes down that says threat intelligence, and it'll work without the Mandiant TI extension pack, but the Mandiant content will enrich it with information like first and last seen. It'll enrich it with different industries being impacted, but also enrich with a lot of rules. We really had to do a lot of work under the hood to get the millions of different IOCs that they're putting in there. And what's cool about the IOCs is it's adding a lot of real-time information to it, like, okay, what IP addresses, what domains, what hashes, what other peripheral pieces of information. And this makes it, a lot more actionable, but a lot more informative and brings together all that information. I could go on for a long time. I'm going to pause and let you ask a couple other questions before I just take up the whole hour.
Yeah, that's a great
No.
answer.
That's awesome. That was a great answer. So, I had a question came in here. Someone was asking about, so of course we do a great job of covering off specific IOCs, specific CVEs, specific threats. How can you help customers understand the nature of a full out threat campaign after something like that's been uncovered and researched? Do we go back into threat cards and we update campaign wide information, or is it more specific to individual IOCs and threats?
Oh, it's constantly being not just updated, it's the cobbling together, the correlation of information. Autonomous information is still incredibly useful. Case in point, let's say that we have a CVE. Mentioned CISA earlier. CISA puts out the KEV list, a known exploited vulnerability list. is this attack that is possible? Do I have a vulnerable asset on my network? And our new asset intelligence that is done up in the cloud using AI does a great job of creating those CPEs. And for those who are unaware, a CPE is a common pathway enumeration. It's essentially taking that, manufacturer, model, all the information possible you need to know about an asset in order to correlate it to what's vulnerable to it. And that matching takes place in there. So, the autonomous information where you're like, hey, I have this CVE. Do you have a vulnerable asset? Is it being exploited in the wild? What's the EPSS, the exploitability probability of this taking place? And also, what is the impact? I mean, is this remote code execution? I mean, is it how much trouble could I be in? That information is incredibly valuable, but like to your question, to be able to cobble that together into not only is this a dangerous thing that you need to address immediately in your network, and is this being exploited in real time, it's also being done by this threat actor group, and they're specifically targeting your industry. And this is an even greater urgency that should be put on you to solve this problem. And we have a number of ways from our workbooks and playbooks and different venues to guide people down that road to really reduce the risk window that they have. And when you're maintaining a large disparate network, especially an OT network, risk management should always be your top priority.
Yeah, in fact, I wanted to bring up another point. Historically, a lot of our customers said they have to dig into a lot of different details. They have to correlate manually a lot of feeds, right? And then run some queries and understand in their SIEM or SOC tools exactly what the risks are, what the threats are, right? I think one of the key aspects of the solution that you, were instrumental in bringing together is automation, right? So a lot of what I've seen is the answers are right there in your face, right? There's no need for a customer to run a bunch of queries, try to understand what the environment is or correlate different feeds, because the existing rules for YARA rules or packet rules or sticks indicators, those are still there. But now, as part of this threat cards that you mentioned, the existence of an attack or existence of a threat actor, based on IOCs, is populated in a way that just shows upfront in that view, right? Was that deliberate? Did you intend to make this automation a key aspect of this development, or were you trying to make it easier for OT people to use it as opposed to a SOC analyst that might be a lot more comfortable running queries and doing dashboards on their own?
Well, I mean, right off the bat, I'm definitely not going to take credit for almost anything. We have a lot of incredibly intelligent people with very deep knowledge in OT. The number of people who have been in OT for decades plus in our engineering and our security research team is remarkable. On top of which, I would argue that we have one of the highest ratios of PhDs within our company than almost any group, maybe early day Google type scenarios where we have. I mean, it's just funny just talking to people being like, "Oh, did you know that so and so was also a PhD?" I'm like, half of our engineering staff have this deep level of understanding. But to get back to the automation, it's really a theme that we've been pushing forward. The whole Vantage IQ theme is I want the information to come to me. What's the most important thing that I can do today? What's the thing that impacts my network the most? If I could do one thing, what is it that makes my network safer, more robust, more resilient? And that's really how we want people to operate. A tangent to this is how we've added a new concept in Vantage called dashboards. And I love dashboards. So you mentioned queries. Queries are incredibly powerful. Like you got to know what you're looking for. You're doing like say threat intelligence. You want to find vulnerable assets, or you want to find vulnerabilities. You want to start pairing things off like the KEV, the EPSS, KEV being known exploitable vulnerabilities, EPSS being the scoring system for how exploitable something is, the CVSS score, which we also do, MITRE scores, it's like a whole list of things you want to include. The new dashboards is someone who already has that knowledge and wants to make just a giant, almost like war room board of amazing queries that have that great information that just comes to you. and correlates that, and they're portable, and it's an incredibly useful and usable thing. So threat cards really is the pinnacle of what our research folks, what our highly just knowledgeable people put together as the most definitive put together of that. But what if you want to pair it off a little differently? That's really where that automation will be played into the dashboards.
Thank you. I guess now I have a question for you, Sandeep. Intelligence is only useful if there's something actionable that can come out of it. And you've been part of many OT segmentation projects, many kind of alert classification. So how do you see people using these new threat cards and these inbuilt features of the threat intelligence to then do what? Like, what do you think is a natural progression for most people taking this information and doing something else with it? Is it building a
Super
conversation control?
question. Super
Yeah.
question. I think that this ties in with the whole evolution of crawl, walk, run, right? So as soon as we start getting this level of threat intelligence and this level of information, it makes it a lot easier to start building out things like playbooks. Talking back again about automation at a high level, automated playbooks to help first responders deal with this type of stuff. At the end of the day, it's the first responders, it's the SOC analysts, it's those guys that are asking for more tools to help them be more efficient, right? We're no stranger to hearing about operator fatigue, alert overload. It becomes to a point that you just get immune to all the noise and the sounds. So actionable alerts with actionable information that have been tuned and curated are of much more value to a SOC team or to a first responder than generic alerts. So I see now the evolution where we have the first responders that are stepping up. They're starting to take their game to the next level because they now have some tools that can help them better sift through the noise. When people like Phil's team, again, augment some of that threat intelligence with everything else we're pulling together, and maybe Phil can talk about this after for 1 second, but our threat intelligence feed isn't just a single threaded piece of information that comes from a back room, somewhere in Switzerland. We actually take a dozen or more different sources and we bring all of this in. We're trying to make people work smarter, not harder. So if I can give you a single point of information instead of you having to worry about 10 different information sources, we're going to obviously help be much more efficient, which actually ties into another comment or question I wanted to ask Phil. One of the things I talk about all the time, and Viv, you've heard me do this many a time, Nozomi is a CNA. We're a CVE naming authority. Phil, can you talk a little bit about what that means overall within the ecosystem, and particularly how that helps our customers above and beyond what our competitors can offer?
Sure. I mean, being a CVE naming authority you can a lot of people can register to do it. Like I recently found out that like one of the groups that I used to do a lot of work with, that's an autonomous group of security research, have one also. But what it comes down to is we are publishing new exploits, and we're doing it in a very ethical way. So like we're not just putting raw information out there. We're working with the manufacturers, but if you go into our product and you look specifically for NN, we love alliteration at Nozomi Networks. You will see rules that are NN. You'll see for our YARA rules, our packet rules. It's new exploits that we originated. We spend an exorbitant amount of money on purchasing different hardware and different things for us to do research on. And it's a very valuable thing because you can't truly be at the forefront of OT security if you are not the originator of new concepts. I mean, Nozomi Networks is not just a very intelligent engine for using other folks' research. We, as Sandy pointed out, we scrape research from all over the place, and also we contribute at a very high level to our own. If you look at our blog, we're almost on an incredibly rapid pace publishing new papers and new information on different pieces of equipment that we have found unique vulnerabilities on. And we are a naming authority for doing that.
Amazing. Thanks, Phil. I'm trying to count these. I just actually logged in right now. I do this once a month or so, and I'm trying to count where we're at just for this year. Last time I checked, it was in the 40s or 50s a month ago. So again, just to talk about how active we are in the space, on an annual basis, we're responsible for close to 100 fresh disclosures or discoveries that were previously unknown in the space. So that's pretty impressive to me.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And that I think brings out the other problem, right? So think about it from a customer standpoint. They get 100 notifications from us, and let's say all the others combined, not as many, but let's say another 100 or 200 globally. A single customer being able to ingest 300 blog feeds of information or even getting a summary. I know some of our competitors in the space provide a summary of threat intelligence feeds, once a week, once every other week. However, I think going back to the automation piece, those blogs and emails or reports are not actionable, right? So they're good to do a presentation. They're good to tell somebody about what's going on in a half-hour time frame. But what really impresses me about the threat cards and the built-in threat intelligence is all this is automated. I mean, as an automation engineer myself, it's just so cleverly done, right? So when anyone looks at their enterprise-wide OT networks, it could be 10 sites, 50 sites, 100 sites, all those assets and vulnerabilities, and to your point, the KVs and EPSS and known malicious IOCs are all correlated before you actually touch the device, right? So you just log into a dashboard, it just shows up that hey, you're at risk or you're not, right? And if you are at risk, here are the locations and here are the things that you should consider looking at, right? And to your point, maybe it's in a location that's not as critical to the customer and it's in a zone that they or a segment where they have a compensating control and they're good to let it be, right? So they can address it in the next outage. Or it could be in their critical manufacturing plant and they need to take action right away. Either way, they're not having to dig into blogs, whether provided by us or by any of the other hundreds of vendors in the space, right? So they're not trying to copy paste from a PDF what the IOC is that's been distributed by a third party and then get into their SIM tool and log in to see if it matches or gets a hit. That automation, I think, is so powerful because none of our OT customers have the time to become SOC analysts on their own, right? So here, I think we're enabling a whole set of personas or people that historically didn't have the time or didn't have the capability to understand the riskiest asset or the riskiest section of their environment. They needed to wait for someone else to tell them, right? So whether it's a SOC analyst, give them a phone call after their research, after 3 hours of researching and concluding that this could be a problem. Now it's in reverse, right? It's the OT people as they log in know that there's a problem. They could be the first one to then alert the SOC analyst to say, "Hey, this is happening in my environment. Is this relevant?" Right?
I mean, I totally agree. The concept we keep going back to is that automation, and the little last thing you said was about time. Time is the most valuable asset anyone has in any possible scenario. And if you are in charge of securing a critical network, a network that is, bolting car doors or lowering uranium rods, or there's a lot of consequences to OT networks, and you could almost argue more than an IT networks. I mean, whenever people's business applications go down, money is lost, confidence is lost. It's a very important thing, but I mean, they're not raising uranium rods out of a cooling tank. It's obviously there are more consequences. Having better time, having more time to solve a problem, being aware of a problem as soon as possible, and also having the steps to do something with it next. And the automation that takes place at Zone Networks is rather impressive. Our entire apparatus for not only pushing out the underlying code that utilizes our threat intelligence, but also the threat intelligence itself, quality assurance, everything. We have a lot of automation built into that, and also the way that we deliver it to the customer. I mean, we're air gaps. We allow you to, we call it sneaker netting in our threat intelligence on a USB stick, but if you're in, a very siloed environment. But if you are in Vantage, and you have that global purview, and there are critical networks and less critical networks, and you need to get that information to come to you very quickly, but you also want to have that cutting edge new threat intelligence pushed down rapidly. If you're a Vantage customer, it'll push everything down for you. Everything. It'll push your licenses down, it'll push your threat intelligence down, it'll push everything down. And even if you were a Vantage customer and you wanted to, just try out the Mandiant extension add-on, right from Vantage, just click a button and you're trying it. I believe it'll be live in about 4 days on October 1st. So it's all about time, it's all about automation, it's all about having information as fast as possible, but being able to do something with it.
Fantastic. I guess I have a fun question for you, Sandeep. You have the Hack the Planet t-shirt. So we have a lot of different names for threat actors, right? Is it possible that we cover all of them? How does that work in our world? So once we have this thing, I know many people are already using it. We have many customers leveraging these threat cards and digging into it. Is it possible that we cover all of them? Or are we selectively choosing certain named vendors? Because I can see a scenario where CISA puts out a letter and say, hey, World Typhoon is attacking the power grid, okay? Or the Australian Center for Cybersecurity or the Canadian Center for Cybersecurity might come out with another of their own version to say, in our region, we got, this fancy bear. But how do you make sure that you're able to search among so many different names and so many different threat actors? Do we have a method to the madness?
No, today we don't. Today it's Googling and talking to your friends and peers and people you trust and trying to figure things out on your own. That's kind of the beauty of threat cards and why it's so impressive, because it brings all those different names together from all the different organizations, and it tells you, hey, you two are actually talking about the same thing, right? Or it helps people in different parts of the world, like you said. In Australia, if it's uncovered by their cyber team, nationally, they're going to give it a name, but in the Americas, we're going to call it something different. So it's important to be able to correlate that together. And that goes back to what Phil was talking about in an automated manner. So if I search for one, I can immediately be told on a threat card that, hey, this particular vulnerability or threat or whatever it happens to be is also called this, 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 and this. And now I have that information instantaneously across all of OT and IT, which also brings me to a very important comment. All we've been talking about so far is threat intelligence. We're talking about threats. We're talking about threats that are exploited, vulnerabilities that are on assets, which brings us to asset intelligence. And that's another reason why it's equally important to understand asset behaviors, asset attributes, and asset details, because the more we understand about an asset, the more we can understand what exploitabilities it has, and therefore the better we can build controls or do what we need to do around that to further strengthen and protect those assets. So I think threat intelligence, although it's obviously extremely important, we can't forget about how important it is to tie that in with asset intelligence to, again, provide a further level of efficiency for these first responders and for these analysts that are trying to deconstruct breaches after the fact.
Fantastic. I guess we have a couple minutes. You mentioned first responders. I do have a question about incident response. So historically, incident response was slower because most places did not have asset visibility. And, once something happens, you kind of dig into logs and things, forensics that are difficult to do because there's little data available. How do you see this threat cards or higher level of asset visibility helping incident responders? Is this Mandiant TI integration also backwards compatible? In other words, for example, if someone has Mandiant incident response, can they log in and see the same level of information and be able to respond quickly? I think I know the answer, but just want to get your thoughts on it.
Well, I want to ask, there were two things in there, and I want to do the first one first, because you definitely touch upon something, is how would threat cards help someone do incident response and live triage? And we have a new concept built into it, and it's called workarounds. So let's say, for example, you have XYZ assets. It turns out it's vulnerable. We see them in the threat card. So this threat actor is targeting this asset class. You have that asset class and you're vulnerable and you want to do triage right now. So there's now a concept called workarounds we built into threat cards. So you can go in and say, all right, if I just SSH into this asset and I just turn off the service, and here's instructions on how to do that, then I'm able to eliminate this vulnerability and do triage myself right now. And I think that's one of the most powerful things you can do because, I mean, it's wonderful to have information. It's wonderful to say, oh, I'm vulnerable to this. And I'm like, okay, like just what Sandeep said a minute ago, what do I do next? And having a playbook or even having the workaround, which the step by step by step, you don't need to be a incredibly technical person to just follow these very simple instructions to perform the triage yourself in real time and solve these problems. And I think that's one of those powerful things. And actually, I've just talked for a few minutes. If you want to talk about the I guess tie between the IR with okay.
Yeah, I know we're a minute over, so I'm going to close it out, and maybe Sandeep, you can add any comment as well. I know many of our IR partners, especially we have certain elite partners that are certified. Many of them are trained in leveraging the Vantage SaaS solution to do forensics and make this part of their IR response, right? So many of them have, in fact, reduced the time taken to remediate quite a bit after an IR situation in OT. So I think the answer there is, yep, absolutely. Most of them are well versed in leveraging these new features to be able to reduce the time to remediate and get the customers back up and running. Anything else you want to add, Sandeep, before we close out?
No, I think we've had a really good conversation today. I just wanted to again thank Phil very much for taking the time to spend with us. Always great to get your insight. I learned about 10 new things today, as I always do almost every time we talk. So thank you very much, Phil. And huge kudos to the threat research team and all of the product team and engineering and development behind this amazing product that we have, which of course, any of us are happy to go deeper with anyone watching this. Please reach out. So thank you, Phil. And Viv, always a pleasure.
All right, likewise. Thanks, everyone. Bye now.
See you next month, Internet.